Let's get a quick test. Can you guys hear us okay? I know I'm very loud sometimes.
Test.
All right, everything good? All right, looks like everything's good.
Hello, world.
All right, well, thank you guys for joining us today. We're here to talk to you a little bit about a product that we built called Dozn. Like she said, my name is Jedi Weller.
And my name is Paulina Gallo.
And yeah, we hope you enjoy our presentation. So,
You're probably wondering from our title, what is Dozn? Dozn is an internal product we've been working on for the past 6 months, and we saw a problem not only internally, but in the outside developer community. And we really are proud of it, and we think we have a really good idea, and we want to show the world what Dozn is.
yeah. And we saw a couple problems, right? So, one of the things we saw is that people are not doing testing, right? And the people who are doing testing are often divided on which type of testing they like to do. So we're gonna get you guys a little engaged right here. We're gonna get some audience feedback, all right? So we're gonna vote on what you guys think is more important.
But we're gonna vote with screaming.
Yes, we are gonna vote with screaming, yes. There's gonna be no hand raising in this presentation at all. So if you say, what are you? You're Ooze?
I'm Ooze and I'm unit test. So
All right, yeah.
for all the unit test lovers, I want you to give me a good ooh at the count of 3.
Try it. Let's try it.
Let's practice. 1, 2, 3.
Ooh.
All right.
Oh, that was a little weak. All right, we can do that again.
No. We have a lot of
sure?
unit
All
test
right.
lovers in here.
All right. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there's not a lot.
All
So
right.
for anyone who likes end-to-end testing, right, we're going to say okay? So all the end-to-end test lovers out there? All right, there we go. Let's try that one more time. All right, for everyone who likes unit testing,
Ooh.
there we go.
Look
For
at-
anyone who likes end-to-end testing, all right. Good job. You guys are winners.
So we took the same survey onto Twitter, and wow, we got close to 600 votes
Yeah,
on
thank you guys for that.
just unit testing, end-to-end testing, and not having enough time. And this was quite shocking that 33% don't have enough time to test their application.
Yeah.
And testing is such a core value in a developer's mindset. You test your code, you write better code for testing, and you save time and money in the long run when you're testing your code.
Yeah.
And the reason why we made Dozn was to capture the 60% of this and try to solve the end-to-end testing and not having enough time to test.
I'm sorry, all you unit testers, you're on your own. We haven't built this tool for you. Sorry. All right, so there's 4 problems. There's 4 main problems that we set out to tackle with Dozn, right? It's really a systematic issue with the testing industry and how developers are treated when we suggest, hey, we should actually test our code, right? A lot of times we're told, oh, that's not a priority, or that, maybe we can get it in the next release, right? I don't know if that's happened to anyone else, but it sure happened to us a lot. One of the problems in the industry is that it's very, very difficult to actually read a test flow diagram or a test flow Excel sheet, right? Has anyone ever seen this before? Yeah, raise your hands. Yeah.
Or something similar in an Excel sheet where it just lays out what feature it is, what you should be testing, just something along those lines, and it does not look clean.
Yeah, it's very hard to read, right? And it's very hard to keep track of what tests are actually tested, what's passing, what's failing, what versions, etc. The second problem we set out to solve is that it is difficult to visualize your app, right? So everyone knows what UML diagrams are. There's all different types of diagrams out there. This is good for developers. This is good for us. But when we're trying to explain to our clients or the product owner, or the boss, what our app does and how big it is and how complicated it is, and we try to explain to him why the feature he's requesting is not a quick fix, as they like to say, we can't do it with the UML diagram because they don't understand, right? So we need to bridge that divide.
So the third problem is there's too much heavy lifting on the developer. So for end-to-end test in particular, you're testing an entire flow of something. So you're testing the functionality of like a purchase flow or something. So you're going through, and it's a lot. Like you're writing that entire feature, and then you complete it, and then you have to go back and write your end-to-end test, and then your page objects on top of it. And you think you're all good, you push it out, and then your client comes back back and you're like, well, I want to add this to the purchase flow. Now you have to go back and add the feature back in and rewrite your end-to-end test all over again.
It's a lot, right? And it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Bug reports. So I want to ask the audience, how many of you have encountered a bug that's not really a bug? Raise your hand.
Everyone's hand is raised.
Everybody has encountered this. So, and it's a lot to debug something that's truly not a bug. And like a good example, our good friend Bill here wakes you up at 3 in the morning and he's just like, oh my God, I can't log into my app. What are you doing? What's wrong? What's happening? And you jump out of bed, you debug this for a good few hours, and you realize it's 3 in the morning and Bill just decided I'm going to type my password in all caps lock. So just pure user error. Yep. So scenarios like that are very common for bugs that aren't bugs.
And wouldn't it be nice if you could just instantly reproduce exactly what Bill did instead of trusting him and what he said he did, right? Or actually know exactly what device he tested on, right? Instead of him just saying, oh, my computer, right? Well, we think so as well, right? So, introducing Dozn, right? You guys ready for a live demo? Yeah. Let's try that again. Are you guys ready for a live demo? Yeah. Woo, all right.
Well,
so were we.
Yeah, we were very prepared, and then we were trying to get a live demo up, and Firebase decided, nah, not today.
This is beta.
So Dozn is completely beta, and we are also using Firestore, which is completely beta. So That's what happens occasionally.
Now, we do love Firestore still. Has anyone else used it yet? Yeah, see a couple hands? Yeah. Very, very cool. At 11:44 this morning is when it decided to go down, so that was fun. Was that?
I did.
Yeah, we tried that. But nonetheless, it doesn't matter because we have a backup. We have screenshots of the whole thing.
Screenshots are a lifesaver.
So I'm going to take you real quick through the application, through Dozn. You guys can totally use this on your own, but we'll just kind of show you how to do it really quick. So the purpose of Dozn is to automate the process of measuring what you do during your testing session, right? So we create a new project for our app. Let's say it's like the Yelp app, all right? And then we do an npm install of Dozn to the app before we build it. We build it and we just start using it, right? We can give it to our QA testers, we can give it to anyone we want, we can use it ourselves. As we are using it and as we're testing, it live will actually update on the Dozn dashboard with each different test and test session that you've gone through, right? It tracks everything you do. And it sorts it by the feature that you're testing and also the flow. So an example of feature and flow, feature would be authentication, flow would be login flow, right? Flow would be register flow, etc. Right? So it's just a nicer way to categorize that. And we categorize it by feature, or by version, I'm sorry. And then the other cool thing about it is you can see a full history of everyone who has tested this feature and flow combination, right? So if I tested it on version 1 of the app, and then I had to test it again on version 1.1, right? And again on 1.2 and 1.3. I can see when it was failing, when it was passing, right there in the dashboard, so I don't have to go back, and I have all the information in front of me. I can also see who's tested it, and I can see which devices it was tested on. And if you actually click on those, you can see the exact device and the device version as well. And we want to visualize it, right? So we have different types of graphs to visualize it. We use the D3 library, open source library, very, very cool. We have all different ways of visualizing your application. This particular one is visualizing all the different ways that you can flow through your app. And when it's live, you can actually just click and drag them to make it more pretty for you. And finally, and the best part, which is going to help you guys out, actually generating tests. So as you run through your app, and as many people run through your app and use it, you can just click a simple button, export test, and boom. We've just written all the end-to-end tests for you, and we've also written all the page objects for you as well.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth do we do this? Well, I'll tell you, it's magic. Just kidding. I wish it was. So how do we do it? So when you go on the Dozn console, you'll sign up, you'll create a project like Jedi said, and you'll be taken to a setup page. So right now we are supporting Ionic and Angular, hooray. So you pick what your project is using and you get an API key and you'll have a list of steps. So we have an NPM package for Angular and an NPM package for Ionic. And both are open source. I'll tweet links later and stuff for you guys to check it out. So what you'll do is you'll npm install one of those things. You'll import Dozn into your project. You'll put your API key in there, and most importantly, you're going to bootstrap your application with Dozn. So what that means is you're wrapping your application, you're encapsulating it with Dozn. So we'll be able to get like a full, true view of your application, what it's doing, capturing all these things that I'll explain later. So after you've done that, you will run your application and you'll be prompted with this modal. So this modal has a few options. So if you're a developer or a QA engineer, you get to type who you are. It's just a simple tag just to know who tested that particular session. And then you get to pick the feature and flow. What's nice about this too is that you can add features on the web client. So if ahead of time you start adding like authentication, search, purchase flow, it'll auto-populate. But if you didn't do that, you can just create features right there, along with flows as well. So it's very simple, very easy to use. So how are we capturing this data as you go through your applications? Well, we're capturing click and input events. We're watching for you as you just simply click and use your application. And as you do that, we're creating these actions. From these actions, we're grabbing the DOM. We're capturing the DOM and we're capturing information. And we're creating the CSX selector, the elements. If you're interacting with like a list with radio buttons, we'll be able to tell, oh, they picked option 3 because we capture that index. So we're truly capturing all your interactions with your application as you go through it. And what's nice about it too, for inputs, if you're like typing your name, like let's say you type my name, so Paulina, Paulina, we're only saving the last letter. So that's not a good way to say that. So we're not, so we're not like firing off an action for Paulina. We're firing off an action once you deselect that input. So it's saving the full thing. So yeah, now that we have all this information, we can actually generate these end-to-end tests and page objects, as you saw earlier that Jedi mentioned. So actually, let's take a look at what they look like. Yeah. How do you?
Oh, hit escape.
I'm not used to these new MacBooks.
I know, right? Anybody else try the new touchpad on the new MacBooks? I can't get used to it.
So luckily, I had an exported test session for authentication. And as you can see, I had a login and register end-to-end test. And it looks pretty basic. Like it's just importing all the page objects in, declaring them, and it just goes through pretty much everything you just did. So we have a few click events here, and what's nice about it too is that we actually save the element HTML. So if you click something and you just kind of want to see, we have it commented out like what specific button that you actually pick. So I know this person hit favorite on the modal component right here, so it's easy to track back. And where is, oh, yep, here is an actual input example. So you could just see my name right there, Paulina, and you could see it was an input, and my name's right there too. So it's very clean. And then let's take a look at a page object, very straightforward. So you're looking at the elements that you've touched. I've opened the account page once, so there's 3 of them. Yeah.
And you guys can fill this in too. So,
yeah.
As a base level, the tests that we generate are going to automatically run, and they will work. So you'll be able to test through your application in just a couple minutes, right? You don't have to write all the code. If you want to expand upon them, if you have further requirements for your end-to-end testing, then we've just created a scaffold for you, and you can fill it in the rest, right? So at a worst-case scenario, you can now test when you weren't going to test before. And as a best-case scenario, you can use this to dramatically decrease the amount of time it takes.
It's an excellent base to work off of.
Yep, totally.
So another thing that we do with all this information is not only do we do the visual component that Jedi described earlier, we actually do a tree graph of each interaction within each component. And what's really nice is that you can actually click into one of these elements and see the exact action itself. So like the time, the CSX selector, the element intertext, and the page. So it just gives more context of what a user can do on a specific page.
All right, so what we described so far, right, is nothing unique. It's basically a recorder with some extra functionality to allow you to present data in a new way, and it'll also allow you to collaborate with your QA teams or your testers or even your clients. So how does machine learning tie into that, right? One of the things we showed you was exporting tests, and we could also export suggested tests, right? So quick overview of what is machine learning. There's all different quotes and definitions out there. This is my favorite one by Philip Burkhart. Machine learning is the study of learning patterns from data, right? If we look at all of the consumer applications that we use to make our lives easier at home, right? Netflix, Instagram, Google, Amazon, right? They all use machine learning. They all make suggestions to you, right? Amazon is going to suggest what to buy. Netflix is going to suggest what to watch, right? Instagram is going to suggest who to follow, right? And this makes our lives easier at home. So why can't we use this same principle and make suggestions to make our lives easier at work? Right? Makes sense. Well, the answer is we can. And these are just some examples. This talk is not about in depth about machine learning. I just want to give you an overview of how we applied it in these principles to Dozn. But if you know machine learning algorithms, you've seen some of these, linear regression, KNN, et cetera, et cetera. So, suggested tests, right? This is what we're building. So, in the best way I can to describe this in 2 minutes that we have remaining, we need to think about our pages differently and about our application differently. So how we did it is, as you're actually testing your app, we track each page, and we track each page as a node, right? And when we go through and we evaluate this data and we prepare it, when you click pass or fail, right, you're passing or failing that test run. You're telling the system, hey, this test run is a good test run. This test run is a bad test run, right? And on a good test run, we look at the different features as both a whole, but also as individual nodes with their source, where they came from, right? And also their target, where they're going to, right? So this item node, right, is a good node. It has a good value, so long as it comes after search and it's before buy, right? So as you're going through the application, you shouldn't be able to just go directly from login to item, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? But you go from login to home, you search for your item, and then you buy it. That's a good test flow. So the first thing we need to do is we need to randomize data, right? If anyone's studying pathing algorithms, we basically just take all the different paths that you've taken, and we randomize it, and we say, okay, let's suggest some new paths. Some paths that may or may not work. They're random. We don't know. And if you look at some of these right here, some of these don't even make sense. Like one of the paths that it's suggesting is going from buy to log out. That's the full test, right? That doesn't make any sense, right? So we would never use that test. So the next thing we need to do is we need to weight the tests, right? So we need to evaluate these random data that we've generated, and we need to weight it. So we do that this is a simplified version of how we do it. But essentially what we do is we say, okay, let's give each node a weight of either 0 or 1, right? So on our example that we generated at the bottom on the screen here, the buy page comes first. Well, in none of our other tests has buy come first, because first you have to log in. So that's a bad starting position. So that's a 0, right? Menu, we can get to menu from buy. We've seen that before. So that's a 1. We can log out from the menu, so that's a 1. Can we search from logging out? Well, we haven't seen that before, So that's a 0. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So if we add up all these, and we're going to get 3 out of 5. So 3 out of 5 of these nodes are in a good position. That gives us 60%, right? So that is a threshold, right? It hasn't met our threshold, and I think we have our threshold set at like 75%, right? Hasn't met our threshold, so we're going to throw this test away. It's no good. Now, the next test that we generate, right, it starts with login. That's a 1. It goes to home. That's a 1. But then it goes to item from home. That's a 0. We haven't seen it before. But this is, again, a suggested test. It's a possibility. So from there, we go to log out, and that's also a 1, and this is 80%. That's now surpassed our threshold of 75%. So this is a test that we're actually going to suggest to you. And this is just recapping what we've just talked about, right? We need to gather the data, which we already do for you. We prepare that data. We create randomized data for you. Then we evaluate it. We weight everything. And then we tune it. So the threshold is something we're playing with the idea of you guys being able to set. Right now we set it, but if you guys have any feedback during the beta process, we're open, we're all ears. And then we predict and we hope it works. All right, so wrapping up. The first thing that we want to, reinforce is that this tool is not just for you as a developer, it's for you and your team. We want you to work better with your QA team, with your product owners. We want you all to be able to work from the same system, right?
Work harder, not smarter. So we're trying to prevent those late nights, lots of coffee. We want to kind of eliminate that gap of working to solve a problem. We have all these technologies, we have all these cool things, so why don't we just bring it back to stuff that, like, we know there's a problem with this, so there's other solutions we can do, and that's kind of what we want to do for Dozn.
And let's think differently, right? What we're suggesting here, and with the test that we generate, it is not 100% perfect test, right? And we're not saying you should write your end-to-end test as 100% asserting this, that this text says exactly that. We actually believe that that is not as valuable. Right? Write unit tests for that. I actually like unit tests. Go figure. Write your unit tests for that. But use your end-to-end test to make sure that you can run through your whole application. And if you use it this way, it's only going to take you a couple minutes to generate your end-to-end test. That's a lot better than writing nothing at all for testing, right? And then having a product release without actually being able to fully test it.
Yeah, so we have a beta page up, so if you are interested, you like what you see, you want a beta invite, go to webjunto.com/Dozn. Feel free to tweet at one of us if you want to talk to us, give suggestions. We're going to be tweeting about Dozn for probably the next forever. Yep.
If you want to contribute, we can support basically any framework. I think we're going to work on React next, but if you want to add Vue or something like that, feel free. I think we have a link to GitHub.
Yeah, well, we're looking for collaborators, so yeah.
Yep. And finally, go Eagles.
Go Eagles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.